Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Grief Drums, and today we're going to be breaking down the Arma Reforger Tools and everything you need to know about creating maps. Now, I know in the intro I kind of stated about creating maps. What we're going to be doing is building a terrain, but I would just like to throw a disclaimer out there. I am not a modder. This is the first time I've ever got involved in this kind of stuff. For Arma 3, I made a load of missions using the Eden editor, but that's about as far as my knowledge goes. So what I've been doing is I've been breaking down the Infusion workbench and trying to figure out exactly how to utilize this system, because at the minute the information out there is kind of lacking. Bohemia are working on all sorts of wiki information, but it's just not quite there yet. So this is all the stuff that I've figured out how to do through the information that is there and through having a good old play inside of this system. Now, as part of that disclaimer, I'm going to show you the stuff that I've learned for how to create a map to get you started and up and running. If there is a better way to do something, please let me know down in the comments below. I'm always willing to learn, and I don't want to impart incorrect knowledge. So if there's anything in here that you know for a fact is wrong, please let me know. But for the most part, this is how I found to get it working and to get everything running smoothly. So let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. When you first open it up, you get the Infusion Workbench launcher. From here, we're going to create a new project. We're going to name it Terrain, nice and simple. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. So that's now created a folder inside of our Reforger add-ons called Terrain. This is going to be a place we can save it. And then we're going to be presented with this splash screen. Now, we'll click on World Editor. Before we do anything, I'm going to break everything down for you, just so you've got a bit of an idea. Well, on the top, we have all of these different tools that we can use. You've got things like nav mesh generation. There is a terrain tool. There's vector entities. There's all sorts of stuff. And it can seem kind of overwhelming at first, but don't worry about it. We'll get to it. Over on the left is the hierarchy. This is everything that is in the world that we've just created or are creating. And then at the bottom left, you have the Create tab. This changes this whole little window over here and will instead give us all of the different entities and stuff that we can place into the world. We're going to be using a lot of these in just a minute, but we will get to that. The resource browser below is where you can find things such as pre-made stuff. So say, for example, you wanted specific vehicles. You can go ahead and add these vehicles. They've got things like BTRs and stuff inside of here. You can add a BTR to the world. We don't need any of that just yet, so we're going to go ahead and ignore the resource browser for the time being. Over on the right, when you put something into the world, when you select it, these are the object properties. These are the things that you can edit on that object to change it. We will be utilizing this in just a minute. So let's change back to the hierarchy over here. Now, the first thing we're going to do, just purely because of the fact, even though it doesn't seem to change anything, the wiki suggests to do this. We're going to come up to the top left and we are going to click this one just up here. This is not showing up at the minute, but it's create a new world. Now this gives us two options, base scene and sub scene. Now the sub scene is a copy. The base scene is for a new world starting 100% from scratch. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And as you'll see, it's given us a world option over on the left. By clicking that, we get all these different options over here, which we're going to mess around with in a moment. But the first thing we need to do is add in a terrain. So bottom left, create, we're going to type in terrain or start typing terrain, and you'll notice that we get generic terrain entity pop up. By clicking and dragging that into our world, we've now got it in our hierarchy. You'll see that the window changed from create to hierarchy. It's now added it in. So that is here. The only things we need to do with this, once we've selected it, are change the coordinates to 0, 0, 0. And we're pretty much good to go. We're good to start. So we're going to save it there. So you can either come up to this little save icon up at the top, or you can hit Control and S, and it will pop up the save world as. Now, you'll notice that a lot of these little folders are read-only. They have little padlocks on them, so you can't save in them, and if you try, it very often crashes you back to desktop. So click on the folder for the project that we've made, and then we're going to go ahead and name our island Kent Island. And I'm going to click OK. So the world has now been saved. We're in a good spot. We're ready to start. I'll go ahead and move the resource browser down a little bit. Now from here, we need to figure out, before we do anything, the size of our terrain and what we're going to be making a map out of. So if we come to Google, I've already selected a terrain here. This is a website called Heightmap.skydark.pl. This is a map generator. It's pretty much like Google Maps, as you can see if I zoom all the way out. it gives you the Earth, and you can look at all the satellite maps, you can look at street maps. But I've found that Instant Terra is another software or program you can use, but this one is completely free. You literally just type this in on Google, come to this website, and you can utilize this. And it seems to work really fine. Now, I've actually already selected an island. It's the Kent Group Islands just here, just southeast of Australia. And this is what we're going to be working with today. So I'm going to try and recreate these land masses. So I'm going to click in the middle of them, and you'll notice it puts this square over the top. I like that. I think there's a decent amount of land to mess with there, but we need to know the size of area that we're covering here. So clicking up at the top left, you get the information. Now, the size and scale map size here, you can increase this. This will increase the size of the squares. We only need 17 kilometers, the smallest. So as long as our map terrain is bigger than 17.2, we have enough land mass to mess with. We're going to easily have enough because the 17.2 is this entire area. We're probably only going to need not even 10. But nevertheless, I think it's better if our terrain inside of Reforger is this size. All of this is going to be underneath the water. You don't want the land to just disappear and there be nothing. So, you know, we can still create stuff underwater. We could maybe add some Easter eggs or something in there later, but we'll get to that. From there, we're going to click on refresh. And by clicking refresh, it actually gives us the minimum height, so the lowest levels, and the maximum height, so the highest levels. So these mountains up here are probably going to be 276.1. You can obviously play around with any terrain you want, but for the most part, I think you don't want to be going too high. You can always sculpt it inside of the terrain at a later date inside of Reforger. So now that we've selected our area, we're going to come over to the left-hand side. Just quickly though, before I go any further, if your screen looks like this, just click on this little change map style on the left, and you can change it to satellite so you can see the areas. But from there, we're going to download a PNG Heightmap, and we're going to download a map image. Now, I've already done this, as you can see down here, and we'll go ahead and open this. Now, these are stored inside of my downloads. This is the one that it downloaded. This is the map. Now, what I've gone ahead and done is I've gone into the photo editor, and I've actually changed it. I've edited it in here, gone to adjustments, and increased the color and decreased the brightness quite substantially, because the way this is going to work is this map is going to actually operate as our paint level underneath everything. So this is going to be the terrain itself is going to be these colors. So if you have it really bright, when you're looking at something in the distance, the hills are going to be really, really bright, and I don't really want that. I want them to be darker. So I've gone ahead and done exactly that. I've increased all the like clarity and vignette, and you can play around with this both now or later once you've imported it and just really sort of tweak it to how you want it. But I've already done that and instead created this. So that's the first one that we started with. This is what we've ended up with. So this is the one we're going to use. So back into the Infusion engine, make sure you're in the world editor. We will utilize those in a minute, but we had a couple of key pieces of information there. The first one is that our map was 17 kilometers, or the terrain we need is 17 kilometers. So by right clicking on the terrain entity, coming down to create new terrain, we're going to leave the name as terrain. That will change this over in the hierarchy, and then everything else we're going to leave as is apart from this block here. By increasing these, you'll notice that the area of our terrain starts increasing down here. So we're going to keep going until we're above 17. It doesn't matter if it goes to 18 because that's more than we're going to need. So we're on 18.9 there, so we've got more than enough, and we're going to go ahead and click create. As you can see, that's thrown in a plane of land, very thin, and we're going to start messing around with that in just a minute. Now, from here, what we're going to do is we're going to start adding some more stuff. So we'll go down to the create tab at the bottom left, and we need a camera. So we'll go ahead and add camera, and then camera manager. So we'll click and drag that into our world. And when you throw that in, you'll notice it has actually clipped to the terrain. If it doesn't, press Control, Shift, and down, and it will snap it to the ground. You can do the same by right-clicking on it, and coming down to here, you can either do Control and down to snap it to the ground, or Control, Shift, and down to snap it and orient it by normal. So I've gone ahead and done that. Now, if we try and play, we can utilize this play button up here, and it will spawn us on that camera marker. But make sure that you use the little arrow drop down and click play from camera position. Otherwise, it won't work. It will throw you anywhere. Right, next up, we need to do a few different bits and bobs. So we need to add by creating a generic light entity or generic world light entity. If I type in light, generic world light entity, we'll go ahead and throw that in. You notice it brightens everything up. Just for information purposes, right click lets you turn inside of this world. If you're holding right click, you can use W, A, S, and D to move around. If you're going too fast, click on the camera up here on the left. You can change the speed of it. Or alternatively, what you can use is you can hold right click and use your scroll wheel to slow down or speed up accordingly. From there, Shift and Z, if you're holding right click, let you go up and down. Oh no, sorry, Q and Z. That's my bad. Q and Z. Okay, so now we've got our world light entity. We need to start messing around with it a little bit. You can do all of this inside of here over on the object properties. You can change the angles and stuff. I'm not going to do any of that in a minute. I'm just going to leave it as is. Instead, what I'm going to go ahead and do is click on the world on the hierarchy, and we're going to start adding some presets to our environment. So, sky preset, we need to give the world an atmosphere. So we're going to go ahead and type in atmosphere and select atmosphere.emap. We're going to click planet preset. There's a little plus here. We're going to add 3 of them. The first one, by clicking the dots on the side, is going to be a sun. So we'll find sun_1 emat. Next one we're going to do is going to be a moon. So we'll click on the little dots. We'll type in moon and grab moon1 emat. And then finally on number 2 here, we're going to select the stars. This is going to add all of these to our world. So stars 1 emat, they are now all part of the world. Clouds renderer, you want to select volumetric clouds, and then under the clouds preset below that, if we type in clouds _volumetric.emat. Now we need to give this an ocean. So ocean material, click the little dots, type in ocean. There's a load of options here. The only one you want to mess with is ocean.emat. And then the one below that is going to be a simulation. So we'll type in ocean again, and we will find Ocean Sim Island. Now there are plenty of other options here. I don't think all of them work, and personally, I wouldn't mess with them at the minute. Just stick with Ocean Sim Island. It does everything you're going to need it to do for the time being. Okay, so we've got the water. We have our terrain, which we will move down in a minute. I appreciate it's currently floating above the water, but all of that will fix itself in just a moment. Now, once we've done that, we need to go ahead and add some post-process effects, and this can be a little bit time-consuming, but there are quicker ways to do it. So we're going to click on the world at the top left, and we're going to create a layer. We're going to call it PP Effects. Don't put any spaces in this because it won't let you do it. I'll show you now. If you have a space in there and click OK, it says you can't use special characters. If it's doing that, just remove the spaces. Okay, now that we've got the effects, we're going to come down to create, and we're going to type in PPE, and it's going to give us generic world PP effect. Now with that, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to click and drag it into PP effects for ease of use, so I know exactly where it is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click Control C on it, and then Control V, and we're going to have 8 of these. Now, as you can see, it's pasted it into this default layer. The reason for that is because I didn't right click on this and click set as active. That's completely my fault. It's pasted them all into the wrong one. So I'm going to click on the top one. I'm going to hold shift, click on the bottom one, and I'm going to drag those into this folder. If you set this as active, it will then start adding them into here. If I add another one now, you'll notice it throws it into this one. We'll go ahead and delete that. Now we're going to have to go through all of these. So the first one, we're going to press F2 on it. That's going to rename the entity, and we're going to name it HBAO. No, in fact, we'll start with SSR. Sorry. We'll name it SSR. Number 2, we're going to do SSDO. Number 3, we'll do as God Rays. 4 is going to be underwater. 5. If you are struggling, if you've forgotten about it, you can right click on it and click rename on it, but the F2 makes it a little bit easier, just pressing F2. So HBAO. 6 is going to be rain. 7 is going to be PPAA. That's the anti-aliasing process. And 8 is going to be the HDR. Cool. They're all in now. Now we have to systematically go through all of these. So the first one, SSR, if you click on it, on the right-hand side, you've got the object properties. Under profile, you can do a drop down, and we're just going to correspond these. So SSR needs to be SSR, obviously. The priority, you cannot really mess with these numbers. I would leave them as they are, or as the ones that I use. This is what the wiki suggests. So the priority for this one, the SSR, is 0. Then I'm going to go to God rays from the drop down over on the right, and the priority for this is going to be 1. Underwater, we're going to select underwater, and the priority for this is going to be 2. SSDO is going to be 14. HBAO is going to be 15. HDR is 16 and PPAA is 17. So HDR is 16 and PPAA is going to be 17. Now you will notice that the time it's getting dark at the minute. This is early in the morning. The sun is only just coming up. If you give it some time, it will naturally become lighter. So don't worry about it too much. Just give it a few seconds. But what we're going to do is we're going to add in the resource browser, we're going to type in time and weather manager. Then we're going to click under prefabs, world, game, and we get time and weather manager. We're going to go ahead and just drag that into the world. And as you can see over here, we can change everything we need to. So the initial date and time, the universal time code. So, you can tell exactly where in the world we are. On the previous thing where we got our map from, you can actually get under the information tab, the latitude and longitude. So if you want the exact world sort of weather conditions, you can go ahead and get that. We're not going to bother with that too much today, but you can change all of that inside of here. So coming up to the very top toolbar is the terrain tool. We're going to click on that. Now this took me ages to figure out. Let me set this layer as active again. The terrain tool, once you've selected it at the top, you need to come down to the bottom right and click on the terrain tool down here. Otherwise, it will not work. This then gives you access to all of this. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to import a height map. Now, we took this from the other website earlier. So all we're going to do is click on the 3 dots. We'll go to where we've stored it, which was in downloads, I believe. Heightmap1.png. And what we're going to do is we're going to resample the heights. So you may not have this ticked. It may be unticked to start off with. We are actually going to utilize the resample heights. And what we're going to do is, if you remember on this, it told us minus 6.9 to 276. So we're going to input those into our world. So minus 6.9 to 276. And then we're just going to click on OK. It says this action cannot be undone. Do you want to do it? Yeah, we'll definitely do it. Click OK, and we'll take a look at what we've got. So it's probably, as you can see, this part of the terrain is all underwater, like we expected it to be. Taking a while to load in. But here are our islands. Now, they are a little bit bumpy, a little bit all over the show. We can do some tidying for that later. But for the most part, the world is here. The world is in. Now, one thing we can do is if the world has ended up like this, I mean, this is probably too high, almost definitely going to be too high, isn't it? It looks horrible. If you go to import the height map again, we can actually change some of these. We'll lower the underwater level to, let's say, 20. And we'll lower this down to 200 and see how that looks. Okay, so we're getting there. We're getting better. The 20 is probably too low. I think the 6 works better, and then we'll cascade it off. You can do this as many times as you need to. Just have a play around and try and find it so it's the closest looking to how you want it. I think for the most part, that's going to be a pretty good spot there. I don't think it's terrible. We're going to be able to sculpt and mess around with this with the tools. We'll maybe do one more and we'll lower it a bit further. We'll lower this to 100 and see how that looks. Or should we lower it to 80? We'll go balls to the wall and have a good look. That's looking a lot better there. So what we're doing there is we're changing the maximum height. We're just dropping it off a lot. I think this is a more reasonable sort of height to play with. Okay, so that, for the most part, is our island built. From there, we're going to go to import satellite map, and we're going to select the file that we had previously, map contracts. I incorrectly spelt it. Make sure this is a PNG file, and we're going to click open. We're going to untick in linear color space. We're going to click OK. And it's going to crash for us. Brilliant. Expect a lot of crashes in this software. Okay, so the reason for that crash is because I was trying to import a JPEG file. For some reason, it had saved it as a JPEG. When I go ahead and open this, even though it's saying PNG, if you right-click on it and edit it with Paint, I know it sounds ridiculous, go to File, Save As, it will then tell you what it's saving as. I saved it as a PNG instead and imported it, and it seems to be working fine. So as you can see now, our islands have a bit of color to them. They're starting to look more like real islands. This satellite image works as a base layer. What you can do, you can actually use it to find where the roads and stuff are. Unfortunately for us, these islands that we've chosen don't have any roads. So we can create our own, essentially. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to build a town over in this area. You can see there's a faint line here. So we'll create a road that goes over to something over in this area. And we'll have something over here as well. I'm fairly happy with this. I think it's not in a terrible spot. So what I did is I actually opened up the map itself inside of Paint. And I've started messing around with creating this. This is just going to be an area in which our roads are going to be. Now, I didn't edit the original one because I'm going to utilize that afterwards. But what I have done is I've put some very obvious roads and stuff on here to give a bit of an idea of where we're going to put them. So let's go ahead. We'll go back onto terrain. We'll go back onto the terrain tool at the top and make sure we've got terrain tool selected at the bottom right. We're going to import the satellite map. Now I'm going to import the one that I've just created with the roads. Render roads is set. I don't think it's going to do anything, but we'll go ahead and import that. And as you can see, this is where our roads are going to be. Now, the island itself, obviously, the way it's spawned in doesn't really allow for all of this. So we're going to start sculpting the land. So if you come up to the top right and click on sculpt, you can change the strength of this tool and the radius of this tool, and you can start messing around. So if you wanted to, for example, this area here where we're going to have a town isn't going to be quite big enough. So we're going to reduce the radius and we're going to start lifting some of this area. Now you can see that bit's blue there. That's because it's actually supposed to be underwater. So we're going to go ahead and hold Alt and then click, and it will lower the terrain. So by clicking, you're increasing it. By holding Alt and clicking, you're lowering it. So we need to raise that little bit there, and we kind of need to smooth this whole area out a little bit, really. So we're going to click on Smooth. We're going to reduce the strength quite a bit, and the radius we're going to leave as is, and we're going to start just flattening this out to make it more suitable for a town. Now, sometimes it doesn't look like it's doing a massive amount, but working slowly and smoothly is definitely a handy way to go. If you try and rush all of this, you'll very quickly get everything wrong, and it will just go horribly, horribly wrong very, very quickly. What I inadvertently did there is by holding Control and moving your mouse up and down, you can change the radius of it, which is handy for doing it on the fly, but you'll notice that I very often do that by accident. See, I did it there. Let's go ahead and smooth all of that area. And it is just a case of playing around, just playing until you get it how you want it. Even when you start spawning in the buildings, you're going to have to do more sculpting to make sure the ground isn't inadvertently going through everything. But I think for the most part, that's not looking terrible there. That's looking pretty good. We could probably do with lowering this right hand side a little bit more. Now my idea for this is I'd like to have some sort of a key and like a bay area here. Almost like a port. Now obviously the area that I've marked out here, it doesn't have to be exactly like that. It's just to give me a good starting point. So we're going to start putting some roads down. And we're going to see how it looks. So in order to put a road down, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on the vector tool at the top, vector entity tool. We're going to make sure we got the vector entity tool selected at the bottom right, and we're going to utilize a new spline. Now we're going to have snap to terrain selected. That's going to make sure it clicks onto the terrain. And once we've got that, we are going to go ahead. We're going to start on this bit here. And you'll notice it straight away spawns in 2 little squares. So by grabbing one of them, we can move it out. We're going to put it to our main road. This is going to be the main road that leads to that port. And then by holding control, you can go ahead and add new points in. Now, as you can see, the splines cause curves. So we need to adjust these accordingly to make the road work nicely, or fit nicely, if you will. It is a lot of trial and error, this, unfortunately. But it's just one of those things that you need to just play with and mess around with until you get it right. Once you have a second point or another point, you'll notice you get this long blue line. That can be adjusted to tweak the shape of the road, or the angle of the road, if you will. Now, like I say, these are just guidelines. That's all they are. It's just a bit of a guideline for us to work with, so we've got an idea of where the roads are going. It doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously, if you're trying to recreate something from real life and from scratch, then yeah, you might have to spend more time tweaking these to get them perfect. I'm not too concerned about that, honestly. This is just a trial and error style thing. Okay, so once our points are down, we've pretty much laid out this this one particular road. We just followed it all the way through. We could continue it on, but I'm going to use separate roads. We've now got this spline shape entity here. From there, we want to go ahead and grab a road itself. So if you go to Prefab Library, Generators, and you go to Roads, you can then select the kind of road you want. So we're going to select Asphalt, and we're going to go ahead, and this is going to be like a main road that runs through the entire island. So we'll grab this one here, Road Asphalt E02. We're going to drag that onto the spline shape entity, and you'll notice it's thrown a road in for us. That is now selected onto this. Now, one thing you might notice is that if you've got the spline shape entity, if I go to the object properties, if you've got adjust height map selected, it can actually cut into the terrain. You'll see that it's adjusted the map behind. If you deselect that, it will follow the terrain as you have it, which very often is a lot better, but it depends what you're after, really. From here, you can still go ahead and adjust it as necessary, tidy it all up, make it look exactly how you want it to look. We'll go ahead and move this one forward slightly and bring it across, but you get the idea. Now, what I personally like to do with this is when I'm doing the roads and stuff like that, I actually go ahead and create a new layer. So I click on the top one, create a layer, and I call it Roads. From there, the spline shape entity, I can grab that, throw it into Roads, and then I know where everything is. Okay, so most of the roads are down. You'll notice that I changed the adjust height map. I actually removed some of that. So I'm going to do a bit of sculpting here. So we'll go back over to the terrain tool, and we're just going to flatten a small radius. Oh, not flatten, sorry, smooth. A small radius, and just smooth this out a little bit. Now, if you aren't happy with one of the roads, for example, you wanted it to be thinner so they don't all look exactly the same, we'll go ahead and select this one here. Which one is this? So, Entity 7, if you click on the asphalt road and then click on the object properties, you can actually adjust the road width on this bit here. Make that road a little bit thinner. I think that keeps things a little bit more interesting. But we can adjust that accordingly. We'll put some buildings in and then scale everything based off of that. But for the most part, the first town is going to be sort of coming together pretty soon. Now, when it comes to this, just for the purposes of seeing how this is going to look, we will go ahead and grab a building. So if you come down to Arma Reforger, prefabs, structures, and this is going to be, well, I suppose it's going to be a town, isn't it? Houses. Let's have some houses. House town. Now, when you're importing a house town, you'll notice down here there are house towns and house town furniture. Now that furniture 2103 matches this one. So we're going to click both of them by holding control, and then we're going to drag them into the world. Now by pressing E, it selects that, and we can rotate it. And by pressing W or selecting this one at the top, we can obviously adjust it accordingly. But for the most part, that's going to be our first building. And it sort of gives you an idea of the scale of this town. It's going to be a very, very small one. We're just doing this quickly. Where's the entrance? By holding shift, you can rotate if you've got the ground manipulation tool selected. We'll go ahead and throw a church down.
But I think round about there is going to be a good point to end it on for today. What I am going to do is another video is going to be going live. Continuing this, if you're interested, we're going to go through forests, painting the terrain, adding more elements such as rocks, trees, bushes, and just really building the map up to be something better and more intricate, more interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Hopefully it helped you out in some capacity. Let me know down in the comments below if you've got any cool tips for doing these kind of things that I may have missed. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, the continuation video will hopefully be up really soon. But until then, have a good one.